It was a cold, crisp morning, the kind where the sun was just breaking through the clouds, casting long shadows across the school courtyard. The air carried with it a promise of change, but for Sarah, that change was about to be anything but good. She had just rolled into the courtyard, her wheelchair humming softly against the paved path, her mind occupied with the simple hope of getting through another day without any trouble. Sarah had been born with a condition that made walking impossible, but that never stopped her from participating in life. She was bright, curious, and full of life, though not everyone saw her that way. In fact, there were a few people who would go out of their way to make her life miserable. It wasn't the first time Sarah had encountered the cruel side of her peers. She'd grown used to the mocking stares, the whispered comments, and the occasional joke made at her expense. But that morning, something felt different. As she entered the school grounds, a sense of unease lingered in the air. Just as Sarah wheeled her way towards the entrance of the school, she was met with a burst of laughter, a sound she'd learned to ignore, though it still stung. Two girls from her class, Jessica and Chloe, stood by the school gates, whispering to each other. Jessica, tall and slender, always wore the most expensive brands. Chloe, shorter and rounder, was the kind of girl who always seemed to follow the crowd. It started with a harmless enough comment, or so Sarah thought. "Hey, look who's here." The girl who can't even walk, Jessica had sneered, her voice dripping with mockery. Sarah didn't answer. She never did. Instead, she kept her eyes straight ahead, trying to focus on the day ahead, knowing that if she ignored them, they would eventually lose interest. But today, they didn't. The next thing Sarah knew, she felt a cold, sticky sensation on her shoulders. A splash of something heavy hit her, and she gasped, the acidic scent of orange juice immediately filling the air. Sarah looked down, her face turning pale as she realized the entire contents of a juice carton had been emptied on her lap and wheelchair. Laughter erupted from the two girls. "Guess it's not so easy being perfect when you can't even control your own chair, huh?" Jessica taunted. Sarah sat in stunned silence, her mind racing. The juice was soaking into her clothes, dripping down the sides of her wheelchair, and she felt humiliated, trapped in the moment. The laughter from Jessica and Chloe rang in her ears as the other students who had gathered around began to stare. No one moved to help her. The crowd seemed to enjoy watching her discomfort. But just as Sarah felt the weight of embarrassment start to sink in, she heard a voice she wasn't expecting to hear. "You think that's funny?" A calm, controlled voice cut through the noise. It was Jasmine, the new girl who had transferred to the school just a few months ago. She was a black girl, quiet and reserved, but with a presence that was hard to ignore. Jasmine had always kept to herself, never getting involved in any drama. She wasn't the type to attract attention, but in that moment, her voice made the entire courtyard go silent. Sarah looked up, her eyes filled with confusion and a flicker of hope. Jasmine was standing a few feet away, her arms crossed, her expression unyielding. She was staring directly at Jessica and Chloe, her gaze sharp and unwavering. "What did you just do to her?" Jasmine asked, taking a step forward. Jessica and Chloe exchanged a glance. "Mind your business, Jasmine," Chloe sneered. "This doesn't concern you." "Oh, it does now," Jasmine replied, her voice filled with quiet authority. Jasmine walked closer to Sarah, her eyes never leaving the bullies. She crouched down in front of Sarah, offering her a sympathetic smile. "Are you okay?" she asked, her tone gentle. Sarah nodded slowly, still in shock. She couldn't believe what was happening. It felt like a dream, or maybe a nightmare that she was trapped in. But Jasmine wasn't finished. She stood up, turning back to Jessica and Chloe, her eyes blazing. "You think it's funny to make someone feel small, to humiliate them in front of everyone? Well, let me tell you something. What you just did, it doesn't make you funny. It makes you pathetic." Jessica and Chloe didn't say a word. They were stunned by the sudden shift in the atmosphere. They had never seen Jasmine like this before. Jasmine wasn't the kind of person who spoke out, let alone confront others. But something about the way Sarah had been treated had sparked something inside her. The injustice of the moment made her furious. You're going to apologize, Jasmine said firmly, taking a step closer to them. And if you don't, I'm going to make sure the whole school knows exactly what you did. The two bullies exchanged uncomfortable glances, but neither one of them dared to challenge Jasmine's resolve. They had always thought of themselves as untouchable, but now, for the first time, they were realizing that not everyone was afraid of them. Apologize, Jasmine repeated, her voice rising. Jessica's face flushed with anger, but she could see the determination in Jasmine's eyes. She opened her mouth to say something but stopped herself. After a long, tense pause, she muttered, "Sorry." Chloe followed suit, her voice barely audible as she whispered, "Sorry." Jasmine didn't acknowledge them. Instead, she turned back to Sarah, her face softening. "Are you okay?" she asked again. This time, Sarah nodded, her emotions swirling. She couldn't believe what had just happened. It was like a weight had been lifted off her shoulders. Jasmine smiled. "Good. Let's get you cleaned up."